Gary Ridgway. This name may not mean anything to people, but he was one of the most terrible murderers in American history. His life seemed completely normal at first glance. He was a person who went to work during the day, greeted his neighbors, and behaved calmly and discreetly. No one would have thought that this man would become a completely different person at night, because he was the Green River Killer. What surprised people the most was his double life. Imagine a family man, a quiet worker during the day, but a ruthless killer walking free at night. Ridgway targeted young women. Most of them were women working on the streets in difficult situations, because he knew very well that the disappearance of these women sometimes did not cause such a big fuss for the police. He chose his target, put them in his car, sometimes promised them money or something else, and then the terrible moments began. Ridgway would strangle them to death. His method was simple, but terrible, because strangulation was both silent and gave him a sense of control. Then he would take the bodies and hide them in the woods, along rivers, or in the depths of the woods. One of the places he used most often was the Kent-Des Moines Highway. Once, after killing a woman, he took her body there, wrapped it around a tree at the bottom of a ravine, and hid it. But when the body disintegrated, the head rolled down the hill and was never found. Even years later, the identity of the woman remained a mystery. The horror of Ridgway's murders did not end with the killings. He would sometimes return to the same places and revisit them. Imagine, he would return to see the remains of the women he had killed. It was a kind of pleasure for him. He felt like God. He would take a life and then come back and see the results. And the police were confused during those years. Dozens of women disappeared. Families were crying out for their daughters' disappearances. But it was very difficult to trace the serial murders. As more bodies were found around Green River, people's fear grew. Everyone understood that there was a systematic killer here, but it was impossible to find him. Ridgway was very cunning. Even when he was called in for questioning by the police, he spoke calmly, seemed like a normal person. His behavior was such that no one suspected him. He even passed a lie detector test. He seemed so convincing that the detectives had to remove him from the list. But the reality was completely different. Every time the police let him go, he would prepare to kill again. His childhood was also chaotic. His relationship with his mother was not healthy. This relationship aroused in him both hatred and a strange attraction to women. This contradiction grew inside him for years and eventually turned him into a monster. Ridgway himself admitted that he had both a desire for women and a hatred for them. These two feelings combined and eventually gave the most terrible result. The exact number of Ridgway's murders is unknown. He was officially convicted of 49 murders, but according to his own testimony, he killed 75, possibly 80 women. Prosecutors and the defense team knew that the number could be much higher. He saw women as objects. Each new murder was just a number for him. He even once said, "I didn't remember who they were. To me, they were just victims." In 2003, Ridgway agreed to cooperate with the judges in order to avoid the death penalty. He told the police that he would show the location of more bodies. They took him to various locations, but at that time, the detectives did not give him much freedom. Often they did not allow him to get out of the van. Ridgway now says that this is why he could not give exact locations. He claimed that at least 20 bodies still remain undiscovered. Some detectives did not choose to believe him because Ridgway often lied. CIA analysts listened to his interviews and said that he was still manipulating us, still hiding the truth. But some investigators believe that there is some truth in what he says, because some details only the killer himself could know. One of the people who has been working on this for years was a former military investigator named Rob Fitzgerald. He has been trying to find Ridgway's missing victims for more than 5 years. At first, he did it just out of curiosity, but then, when he saw the suffering of the families, he started working to find their daughters. Fitzgerald says that the families of the victims deserve to know the truth. They need to know the fate of their children. Fitzgerald spent weekends searching in the woods and along the banks of rivers. Sometimes Ridgway would even call him from prison and give him clues. "Search there. Maybe you'll find it," he would say. Fitzgerald understands that much of Ridgway's words are fiction, but there may be small pieces of truth even if they are small. That's why he doesn't want to stop, because every bone is an answer for a family. Despite all these searches, no new bodies have been found for years. Ridgway explains this with other things. He says that the bodies have decomposed, been carried away by animals, and the tracks lost. But maybe he's just playing a game, because he has another motive. He has complained many times in interviews that everyone knows Ted Bundy, but the Green River Killer is not talked about much. Maybe Ridgway just wanted to make his name more deeply etched in history. Maybe he wants to establish himself as the most terrible killer. That's why he says there are 80 or 85 bodies there. One of the most difficult moments during the trial was when the victims' families confronted him. They tearfully mentioned their daughters' names. Ridgway sat with a cold expression on his face. Sometimes he even laughed. It was as if this was just a spectacle for him. He felt no remorse. He was so calm that even the judges were stunned by his behavior. All this simply shows a truth. Sometimes the calmest, most ordinary-looking people hide the most terrible secrets. Ridgway was the clearest example of this. He walked, talked, and worked in front of people for years, but at the same time he was one of the most prolific murderers in American history. His story is a warning to people, because sometimes danger hides exactly where we think it is. The story of the Green River Killer is not yet completely over, because there are undiscovered remains. There are unanswered questions. Families still hope that one day their daughter's remains will be found and buried, and that's why people like Fitzgerald don't give up the search. They believe that someday that answer will be found. Gary Ridgway will now remain behind bars for the rest of his life, but the traces he left behind still remain. Dozens of lives were cut short, dozens of families were in tears, and his name will always be remembered as a symbol of fear. When you listen to this story, you wonder, how can a man who seems so simple actually turn into such a monster? How can the police not see him, not feel him for years? Most importantly, how can a person lose his conscience so much? Ridgway's story will always keep these questions open. Maybe there is no answer. But one thing is certain. He went down in history as one of the most terrible names, and will always be remembered by this name. We will share unknown facts and events as soon as we can. Stay tuned.